everyone. My name is Brittany Minoff. I'm the communications manager at the NYC Hospitality Alliance. I wanted to thank you all for joining us for our Powerhouse Women in Hospitality event in honor of International Women's Month. So we have some great panelists lined up, but first I'd like to introduce our moderator, Erika London. She's president and partner of SimpleVenue, a hospitality group that owns and operates venues up and down the East Coast, including Sushi by Bo, Sushi Suite, Sidebar, Hudson Terrace, and more. So thanks again, everyone, and enjoy. And Erika, I will give you the virtual stage.
Great. Thank you so much, Brittany. So it's no secret that the hospitality industry was hit the hardest by the pandemic, as we've seen over 1,000 bars and restaurants close permanently in New York City over the last year. Sadly, also no secret that women have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. But as devastating as the news of the last year has been, I think we can all agree that we're all feeling a positive shift in the air between the weather and the increase in vaccinations. And, you know, as the saying goes, empowered women empower women. So what better way to get motivated and inspired than listening to stories of some of the powerhouse women in our industry? So let's go ahead and introduce our panelists. Today we have Ariel Palitz, who is a lifelong New Yorker and the first ever senior executive director of Nightlife for the mayor's office. Hi, Ariel. We have Anya Sapozhnikova, the co-founder and creative director at the House of Yes in Bushwick. We have Annie Shee, partner, GM, and beverage director at King Restaurant in Manhattan. And we have Melba Wilson, who is the president of the New York City Hospitality Alliance, chef and owner at Melba's restaurant in Harlem, and an incredibly powerful voice in our industry. For me, one of the things I love most about hospitality professionals, besides their energy, is the fact that there's rarely a traditional path of how they got to be where they are today. So I'm sure everyone would love to hear a little bit about how all of you got started in the industry. And Ariel, why don't you kick us off?
Sure, happy to. Thank you so much, Erika, for having me here today. I'm so excited to be actually part of this particular conversation. I think every woman in hospitality knows that we are all sort of part of our own club. And when you meet another woman who runs the show in nightlife and hospitality, only that woman knows exactly what you've been through and how you get through it on a day-to-day basis. And so I think it's a really great opportunity to be able to share our stories with other women, hopefully, that are willing to take this incredible ride that we have all wound up on. Like you mentioned, I did grow up in New York City, born and raised. Melba says born, bred, and buttered and toasted. I grew up in an era where at 10 o'clock at night, there was a PSA on TV that says, it's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are? And that's a true New York story. And the fact is, it's because most of us were out at the clubs, out hanging in bars and with each other. Our parents were out also hanging out in other places. So, you know, when you grow up in the city, you sort of segue into nightlife. And at that time, it was really a special time in New York. Mars, MK, Red Zone, the Tunnel. And it was really just such a magical time of diversity and music and love and dance. And it's where I belonged. It's where I knew I wanted and always needed to be. And ultimately, it led me to be a promoter, because what else would I be doing with my life? So I started a live music open mic jam session with DJs called the Solution, Spontaneous Groove Open Mic, a common ground for diverse expression. And I did it at the Tunnel and SOBs, and I did for over 5 years in the city, actually, until One day, a friend of mine said, "Oh, I'm opening up a small club in your neighborhood. I'd love to get your advice on how to open it and what's the neighborhood like." And I said, "I have a better idea. Why don't I join as an investor into this? Because, women promoters, know the game, and it would be great to be have a little bit of ownership and not have to be working for other owners and have to deal with all the other things you have to deal with." So that was sort of my segue into ownership. And ultimately, I was able to buy everyone out, all the male partners that I had. There were 7 of them. Because, you're always like, "Oh, I wouldn't do it that way. I wouldn't call it that." And so eventually, to be able to take it over and to be the number one person in charge, I was able to eventually open and operate Sutra Lounge. In the East Village as a sole female proprietor, and own it for 10 years. 2 floor, 2 bar, 2 DJ booths. And it was on the corner of First and First. And for me, that was a common ground for diverse expression, right? The nexus of the universe, the nexus of New York. And I wanted it to represent New York culture, hip hop, reggae, Latin, 80s, rock and roll, house, and the DJ dance culture in this little 250 capacity bar for 10 years in the city. And it was like the best ride of my life. It prepares you for everything. Women bar owners, any bar club owner needs to be prepared for anything, because anything can and will and does happen. And usually about 5 minutes after you close. But, after I sold the bar, I became a consultant because I wanted to help other people to do it. I used to joke and say, I want to help other people do it so I don't have to. But ultimately, it led me to this position. People always ask, how did you become a bar owner? I just did what I loved, and I hung out with the people I loved, and I lived what I wanted to do. And the position ultimately and wildly led to someplace I never saw coming. When I told my dad I was opening up a bar, right? This is every father's worst nightmare, that his daughter is going to open up a club. And he goes, "Why don't you just get a job in politics?" He thought I was crazy, and I thought he was crazy. And then I guess he ultimately got the last laugh, because when I read the job description for the director for the Office of Nightlife, it really just wound up being my life story on a page. Not only just being a bar owner, but at the same time being on the community board, liquor licensing, quality of life issues, everything I had ever done, everything I'd ever cared about led me to this place I never saw coming in a million years. And now it's really just about taking all of that real world experience and making sure that this industry, this beloved industry, has a seat at the table with somebody who can speak from real experience, to make sure it's represented honestly. And I will just say, what makes it unique for, what differentiates women and men in the industry is just, it's a different perspective, a different sensitivity. You pay attention to different things, you care about different things. And I think that it's not a big leap from hospitality to politics, because it's all about service, right? It's all about serving. And essentially, I think that's essentially what it's all about, caring about other people, serving people, and making sure we see nightlife as an opportunity to look out for each other and care about each other. And I think that's what women in hospitality do.
Wow, that is an incredible, incredible story. Thank you, Ariel, for sharing. Annie, how did you get started in the restaurant industry?
So like Ariel, I am a born and bred New Yorker, grew up in Rego Park, Queens, and then my family moved to the Upper East Side. I had always loved restaurants. I grew up around my mother's dinner table, but we didn't actually go out to restaurants all that much. I was in finance after graduation. And I had a chance to move to London. I'd always wanted to work at a restaurant. So before I left New York, I had cold called Jonathan Waxman at Barbudo, which is where I had my high school graduation dinner. And he had accepted a stage for a brief period of time. Unfortunately, that never happened. I ended up moving to London. And there I kind of wanted to stage at my favorite restaurant in London, which was called the Clove Club. And it was around that time that I met my business partner, my now business partner. She was a cook at the River Cafe in London. We met because my roommate went to college with her, and we kind of got together and just started doing pop-ups. We both had full-time jobs, but we would take a day off together, plan the menu. I would kind of run the logistics, do the serving, and it was through word of mouth. We'd sell tickets, and we did that over the course of a year in London. And then one day we both kind of were on the same page and decided to quit and move back to New York. So we landed in New York. We literally had no clue what we were doing, and we were joking about this before, but if I knew everything that I know today, I probably wouldn't go back and do it. But I think a little bit of naivete is important when you want to take a risk. But we Googled, how do you open a restaurant? And I think actually it took us to an NYC.gov website that had a checklist. So that's actually where we started. And it took us a full year to kind of go from that point to actually being able to open King. I think we weren't ready for the commitment. We really thought that all we could do was a pop-up. And then as we slowly explored the cost of opening a pop-up and what the real estate looked like and the permitting and licensing, we realized that we weren't that far off from the full cost of just opening a 10-year commercial lease restaurant. I think at that point we were 25. The thought of a 10-year lease commitment was like beyond what we could fathom. But we made our way there. We opened King in September of 2016. Friends and family was like, I think August 28th. We opened the restaurant with the three of us, myself and my two business partners, Claire and Jess. We had hired a chef, a cook, Sadie, who had also never worked in a restaurant, but went to college with Claire, and she's now our head chef. And we didn't have a dishwasher, and we didn't have anyone else. And I think I put up a Facebook status post asking people to apply. We had no clue that you were supposed to get on Craigslist. So it was a really rough couple of months, rough couple of years. We figured it out eventually, but it was a really incredibly steep learning curve. And I think we had just felt like we were hitting our stride when COVID hit. And then it was kind of back to the drawing board all over again. But yeah, that's kind of the story. King is approaching its 5th birthday in September.
Well, happy 5th birthday. I'm glad you found the right Google link. Very, very different story than Ariel, but I think the common denominator here is the passion that brought you here. Anya, you have a very unique business that you own and operate. Tell us about what you're currently working on and how you got there.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. So I did not grow up in New York, unlike everyone else here on this panel. I grew up in Moscow, Russia, and my family immigrated to the States in '96 when I was 10 years old, and bounced around the States for a while, and then landed in Rochester, New York, where I attended high school. And when I was about 16, I met my best friend in the whole wide world, who's also my business partner and co-creative director, Kay Burke. We met at an underground punk show. Because 16-year-olds obviously couldn't get into bars, but we love music, so we would get permits for parks. We messed up our friends messed up the permit. We all ended up in a basement. Everyone became friends, and so Kay and I have stayed friends and collaborators since then. And we both moved to New York when we were 19 years old, 18, 19, and so we got into nightlife out of necessity because we weren't old enough to get into clubs. So the only way we could get into clubs, and we needed to be on the dance floor. That was non-negotiable. And the only way we could get into clubs is by working at some of these parties. So we worked at the At the Delancey was one of our first paid gigs for, we were stilt walking for $60 and drink tickets. It was amazing. And yeah, and so we kind of, before we even knew about the history of like club kids and New York nightlife, we naturally were just like, this is how you can, really just get to all the best parties and be able to get in. And then, and simultaneously, we got really involved with the Brooklyn underground parties, a lot of overlap with like the Burning Man community. But it was a lot of kind of like participatory partying. So no one is, so events weren't a product that somebody just paid for and received. It was more about, we're making this thing together. We're not happy with how like the bottle service clubs don't interest us and we can't afford them. So let's make something that's about art, that's about community, that's about culture. And let's have everyone who's at the party help build that. And so this was definitely our first, that's what nightlife was to us. And then eventually we came across a space in Ridgewood, actually just 6 blocks away from where our current location is. And it was in huge disrepair. Somebody was trying to pass the lease off to somebody else because they were super behind on rent. It was a maze of rooms and just like cat feces everywhere and bottles of mysterious liquids strewn around. And I don't know why, but I just like, I wasn't even looking for the space at the time, but I was like, I'll take it. And so we basically just had a bunch of our friends come over and we were like, bring a sledgehammer or beer or neither or both. And we're just going to demolish everything and rebuild it. And and then it was a bunch of 20-year-old kids doing what 20-year-old kids would do with a loft in the middle of nowhere at the time in Ridgewood. And so we did that for about, I think, 10 months or so. And, we just had great parties. We didn't think we were doing anything like culturally real. Like it was just, let's have our friends over, let's have a solid dance floor. And at the same time, we were also, we were getting into circus arts. And so we had an Ariel rig and we were like, let's do Ariel and dance. And that's it. And then the place burned down to the ground. After it was like 2 days after one of our best parties. And we had just finished cleaning the whole loft. And then a piece of pita bread got caught in the toaster oven and it set this giant monster head from where the wild things are on fire that caught the whole tin ceiling on fire. And the whole place burned down in literally like 4 minutes or so. And so after it burned down, I remember we were all on the sidewalk, just kind of like, with just the clothes on our back. And the word has spread around Brooklyn that the House of Yes burned down. And that was the moment where we realized that what we were doing wasn't just a party for our friends, but it was something that other people were affected by beyond just being on the dance floor and having a good time. And so I remember it was Rubulad, and at the time they were called the Danger Party. They both canceled their events and moved them all into one party and did a fundraiser for us. And at that point, I mean, we were, homeless, confused, everything's gone, and all of the Brooklyn Underground wants us to keep going. So like, we're going to keep going. So we took the money from that fundraiser, and about a month later, we found a spot that was 30 feet tall and used to be a former ice house with about like 10 inches of cork insulating the whole inside of the building, like the kind of cork that they don't even make anymore, right? Because it was an ice house, you could feel the bass in your feet from a block away, but you couldn't hear anything. And so for 5 years, we were able to have very loud things happening in a completely underground space with very minimal heat from the police. And on top of it, what we were doing is we were running an aerial acrobatic studio. So at the time there was only like 3 main ones, and we were one of them. There was Circus Warehouse, there was Streb in Williamsburg, and then there was us. And I think that like the local authorities, they saw that what we were doing was mostly making art, and that the parties were just like, you got to throw the parties to pay the rent. And so they knew it, and they saw that we were doing our very best to stay safe and to create culture. And so that went on for about 5 years. But of course, with running an underground establishment, there's a financial glass ceiling. You can't get investors. You can't even consistently sell tickets. So there's a certain level of, charmingly janky that you can be at. And at a certain point, you can't really grow. So after 5 years, the landlord raised the rent and we weren't able to afford it. So we moved out and packed everything up. And then after that, we were like, let's, if we're going to keep doing this, we're going to do this legally. We're going to do it right. We're too old to be messing around. So we'll find partners that know about restaurant, hospitality, bar business, or somebody who knows about construction. So we can just do this right. And then my friend Justin Ohayan, who was he's a phenomenal drummer, and so I've known him through performance art. He said, "Hey, my cousin Alana is looking to do something interesting." And so I think we had coffee with Justin and Alana twice and decided to go into business together. Justin and Alana both come from the Cafe Mogador, Cafe Orlin family. So they grew up in bars and restaurants. That's all they know. That's all they love. And then Alana happens to have also had a construction company doing boutique renovations of people's condos, which is like, let's glue this weird thing to this other weird thing and have it be indestructible, which is perfect for restaurant and bar design. And and we just kind of felt it and went into business together. And so now it's been 7 years, like including with the building and that whole nightmare that happened. And with the third House of Yes, we realized very quickly that even with all of our combined experience in hospitality and arts and construction, that we were way in over our heads. And it's that naivete that everyone keeps talking about. It's like, you never know how crazy it's going to be. Like, you think you have experience, but it's just, it always finds a way to surprise you. And yes. And it's 4 partners who are, all 4 of us are managing partners. We're on the ground every day. We love each other, and it just ended up working out. So we've been we just celebrated our 5th year anniversary virtually.
Another one.
Yep.
Congratulations. Happy 5th year anniversary.
And then I think we've been around as an organization for about 12 years now.
Amazing.
So that's the story.
It's a great story. What I think is most interesting is that you said that you started the business out of necessity for yourself. But now this almost became a necessity for the network and for the space that you created. And you obviously created something very, very special that a lot of people are really connected to and will follow you around anywhere you go. So congratulations on that. Melba, from Melba's Restaurant and the New York City Hospitality Alliance president. It feels to me, and probably anyone else that has seen you speak, that you were born for this industry and you were born, to do what you're doing. Tell us about your story.
Well, first of all, Erika, thank you so much. And I'd like to say happy Women's Herstory Month to all of the ladies on the panel, as well as our sisters watching virtually. As Ariel said, I was born, bred, and buttered right here in the village of Harlem. And my family, however, they're from a small place in South Carolina called Hemingway, South Carolina. So after school ended in June, my mom, dad, brother, and sister and I would all hop in the car and we would take the 10-hour drive to South Carolina to visit family members. My grandmother, grandfather lived there, aunts and uncles. And that was our summer vacation, literally every single year. What was magical about that time for me is that my grandparents had a huge garden. So before the term farm to table was even coined, that is how we cooked. That is how they cooked. And I would watch my grandmother go into the garden, pick tomatoes, greens, potatoes, canned vegetables. And to see her around the kitchen, prepare this meal, lovingly prepare this meal for all 9 of her kids, plus the grandkids, plus the great grandkids, and also for the just in case. You guys know what just in case is, right? Just in case the neighbor came by, just in case somebody just knocked on the door, rang the bell. You can never have just enough. You always have to be able to feed the community. just made me fall in love. Everything in our family that happened over food. Whether it was a wedding anniversary, a big announcement, a birthday, the birth of a baby, or even a funeral. You know, food was that common denominator that brought us together. I wanted to emulate that. So when I got the opportunity to work at the world famous Sylvia's restaurant, I hopped on it. I went in heads first and I wanted to do any and everything that I possibly could. I literally started out as a cashier, worked my way up to a hostess and then to assistant manager, worked in catering. And one day I was doing an event for my aunt over at Sylvia's. I was doing, I think it was 30th or 35th anniversary of the restaurant. And I went to a meeting at Gracie Mansion. And it was where Sylvia's, they were honoring someone in film and in television. And it just happened to be Robert De Niro this year. I was around the table and everyone's talking about what they were going to bring. I was the only brown girl in the room. So when it got to me representing Sylvia's, I said that I would bring fried chicken and collard greens. Well, there was this guy with a very big presence, kind of reminded me of Pavarotti. And he said to me, why don't you bring sweet potato pie? Well, me being a 20-something-year-old girl from Harlem, I kind of sassed him and shook my head back and forth. And I said, why don't you bring sweet potato pie? Little did I know, it was Drew Neoparent. Oh my God. Totally thought it was Pavarotti. It was Drew Neoparent. Fast forward, the event happens some 6 to 8 weeks later. I get a tap on the shoulder. And this Pavarotti, AKA Drew Neoparent guy goes, these are for you. They were a dozen mini sweet potato mousse tarts that were to die for. Like they make you want to smack your mama, as we say uptown. I bit into one of them and they were like heaven. Drew reached out to me and, you know, he came to the event that I'd done at Sylvia's and he was amazed by it. Asked if I had ever thought about opening my own business, and I said yes. And he and De Niro offered me a partnership. They wanted to open up something in the theater district. Me being born and raised in Harlem and seeing the tour buses just come through, and this was back in the 90s, just seeing them pass by Minton's Playhouse, which was the birthplace of the music known as bebop. The house band used to be Dizzy Gillespie, Thelonious Monk, Charlie Parker. But the place had closed in '79. So tour buses would pass by, take photos, and just keep going. I saw this as a missed opportunity. And I said, someone has to reopen Minton's Playhouse. If not me, who? And if not now, when? And so I was able to convince Drew, Quincy Jones, and Bob to come uptown and just see the space. Once we walked inside the doors, they saw the magic that I saw. Now, we're talking about the 90s. Harlem was a totally different Harlem than it is today. Let's keep it real. We worked on getting investors. We had the most difficult time. And 2.5 years later, we had to table the project. We could not pull it off. However, I have to tell you that I got a PhD in this industry. You know, hanging around with the best restaurateurs in the business and just learning and soaking in all that I could. I got married 2 years later, had a son, and I was on a flight one day and the flight attendant said, in case of an emergency, put on your mask first. Of course, we hear this every time we fly, but on this particular day, it was an epiphany for me. It was an aha moment. And I looked at my life and I said, I'm putting on everybody else's mask. As we often do as women, we take care of everybody else. And I said, I don't want to wake up one day and go, what about me? So my mom being from South Carolina, she was a stay-at-home mom with 3 kids. And my dad would work every Friday. He would bring the paycheck home, give my mother the money, let her pay the bills. Well, my mom always took a little extra, just a little just in case money, and she would put it under the mattress. So every Friday when I got paid, you know what I did, right? I took a little extra. Sometimes it was $10, it was $5, it was $20, could have been $100, and I put it under my mattress. So after I had this epiphany, I said, you know what? Let me see how much money I have saved under the mattress. Well, I started counting, counting, and counting. And I had amassed a small fortune. I had a little over $312,000 saved under my mattress.
It's
And I
amazing.
decided, let me take a chance and let me invest in me. I love the food industry. I'd worked with Josefina Howard at Rosa Mexicano. I started the first gospel brunch at Sylvia's restaurant in Harlem. I'd worked with Michael LaMonaco at Windows on the World. And I said, what about me? Let me take a chance on me. What better place than Harlem? I wanted to be able to employ people from my community, but also to show that we can invest in the Harlems of the world, and just take a chance on us. And so I did. I found a little space on the southwest corner of 114th and 8th Avenue. The reason I picked that location is because 114th and 8th Avenue at that time in 2004 was one of the most notorious drug blocks in Harlem. And I wanted kids in our community to know that we have options. And I wanted to be a part of the change that I seeked. Invested, built the restaurant, and they started coming. It's how many years later? Melba still sits there. I have Melba's Catering, where we cater for up to 10,000 people at one event. And I'm able to employ people from my community that look like me, that live in the industry. But more importantly, I'm able to mentor kids and to teach them that if I can, you can too. And if I can, so can you. I'm right now at Melba's Muscles, which is slated to open the end of May. And then I'm also opening another place in Newark. I have no partners, no investors, and here's my son. He's the only partner. Need some ice cream. I'm so sorry. I told you I'm a mom, right? He knows
He's so busy. If he doesn't feed you, when else are you gonna have time to eat?
Yeah, I haven't eaten all day. I have a cup of iced coffee. I'm sorry. Sorry about that. But I love what I do. I love what I do. Having an opportunity to be the first female and the first person of color to be the president of the New York City Hospitality Alliance. We ladies know that this is not easy, but we also know that as women, when we step into the room, we get things done. We are multitaskers. We find a way to go over, through, under, around it, but we get the job done. And we also realize that we are our sister's keepers. I'm super excited to be here along with my sister panelists and Erika, our moderator. Thank you guys so much for having us.
Thank you, Melba, so much. So the good news is I was right. You were born for this. Thank you for sharing your story. Very inspirational. And thank you for creating the magic around yourself and your brand and all the people that I'm sure you're inspiring along the way. So let's kind of get into some more nitty gritty about the experiences that we've all had. Annie, in addition to your 5th year anniversary, King Restaurant was recently named a top restaurant by New York Times and also received a James Beard Award nomination. So clearly you're doing something very right. Congratulations. Where do you draw your inspiration for the brand and for the menu and for everything you're creating over there?
So we are kind of the core of King is that we are a daily changing menu. That means the menu is incredibly short. It's 4 starters, 3 mains, a couple of desserts. And when we opened King, we knew that this was the way we ate at home. It's the way Claire and Jess grew up cooking. It's what they would serve you if you went over to their house. And a daily changing menu really actually allows you to be the least wasteful with your food cost, with what you have in your walk-in. And it just made a lot of sense for us. I think at that time, it was a new concept to New York. People told us we needed to have a signature dish. People said we needed to have a burger. And obviously we didn't have any of these things. The food is inspired by the south of France and Italy. And I think to this day, the daily changing menu is still what keeps us inspired. It's the rhythm of the year. You know what to look forward to. Right now, we're in March. We're looking forward to like getting a little bit of spring produce, maybe having some peas in soon. And it's that rhythm that keeps us going. Like, you know what to expect. So there's a level of familiarity that's really comforting. but you also get the anticipation of knowing that there's something fresh coming your way. And that really informs the beverage menu as well. We are always changing our wines by the glass, our wine list, our cocktail program. And I think ultimately, we were asked a lot about the concept when we were trying to open and talking to investors who were really people that were just cold emailing off of LinkedIn. And it wasn't a concept. This is the only kind of food that Claire and Jess could cook. It's the food that they grew up eating. So for us, it wasn't a concept. It's just the way we wanted to entertain, the way we wanted to host. And we had a really clear vision for that. And I think that kind of sincerity in what we wanted to create is still what inspires us and allows us to kind of make cohesive decisions, especially through such turbulent times as obviously this past year has been.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it definitely feels like there's, a very strong authenticity behind what you're doing, considering that you didn't really have a ton of previous experience and you just kind of felt the need to do it and you went for it. What kind of challenges have you experienced along the way as a woman in the industry?
I think when we first opened, everyone wanted to paint us as 3 young women opening a restaurant, and that's what the press wanted to talk about. That was not what we wanted to talk about. We wanted to talk about the food and we want to talk about the wine and the incredible experience of dining at King. I think what was so crucial was we didn't want to be painted into a box of being female owners. That's not why people fall in love with hospitality or a restaurant. It's not why people come back. I think we wanted to be respected on our own merits. And if people saw women and saw us owning and operating a restaurant and that inspired other women, that was important. But I think it was really crucial to us that wasn't the primary message. This past year has been obviously incredibly challenging, but we've had incredible staff see us through it. So we actually closed in March when everyone closed and reopened in June for a little bit of just takeaway, like snacks and drinks at the window. We reopened in July for outdoor dining and have been doing it consistently since. And the months of July and August were some of the hardest we've ever had. And it really was because there was a disconnect between what diners expected restaurants to be able to provide and what we were willing to do. And I think it was all around the mask policy, like people were just not into wearing masks at that point, and it was still fairly new. But for us, it really came down to do you respect the people who are serving you and who work at this restaurant? And it was kind of a line in the sand for us. And that's kind of been a lot of the conversation we've been having at King is what does it mean to work in the restaurant industry? And what kind of dignity and respect does that deserve? So it's been an interesting year, feeling good that we're finally getting to spring and summer weather. The full team is vaccinated. So I think overall, like you said, we've really turned a corner.
Great. Thank you. Ariel, you mentioned earlier something that stuck with me, that you bought out all of your male partners at one of your businesses. Talk to us about some of the challenges you faced and obviously overcome as a woman in the industry.
Well, as Melba said, when people are underestimating you is really when you get over, right? And so there's a lot of being underestimated all the time when you're the woman in the room, the woman in hospitality, but we're laser focused. We know where we're headed and everything else is sort of just in the way. And we just knock things out of the way, methodically moving forward. And it's challenging and it's disappointing and it's frustrating, but it doesn't stop anything. And so I think really it just sharpens your knives when you have an adversary, when you have someone who doesn't believe, when somebody underestimates you. It sharpens your resolve and your determination to resolve the issue and do what you have to do. And so it only made me get where I wanted to get faster, I think. I don't think it held me back as much as it made me more determined. But you can't really say that it's not a factor, you know. You have to see the difference in the way we negotiate, the way we resolve a problem, the way we identify solutions. It's a different way, it's a different sensitivity. And I think, especially in this industry, it's something that really helps you to connect better with the people you're serving and being with. But it's just part of the deal. And I think just the more of us that are in it, you know, the more, you know, we resolve the problem of not having enough women in the industry. Slowly but surely, I think it'll be less and less of a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the more I found, the more women that you connect with that are, you know, on a similar mission as you, even if the goal is not the same, if their mission is, it's definitely extremely helpful in, you know, overcoming the challenges as they come your way, and, you know, just actually growing from other people's experiences when they're willing to share them with you.
And there are actually so many women in the industry anyway. I mean,
So many.
servers and DJs and dancers and performers. I mean, it's really the ownership where there needs to be an even greater representation. But this industry is flooded with talented, brilliant, driven women. It's, I think, very much a woman-driven industry in a lot of ways, actually.
That's why it's so great. In addition to the challenges that we've all faced and overcome, you know, stemming from being a woman in the industry, there's obviously a lot of other challenges that we've come across the last year. There's been a lot of talk about people pivoting their businesses and adjusting what they're doing day to day, you know, as what they're offering, their services, their food, their menu. I'm sure all of you have had to make a lot of changes over the last year. Anya, I know you have some very interesting changes that you've implemented in your business. Can you talk to us about that?
Sure. So I don't even really recognize my business anymore, because it used to be about a bunch of strangers sweating on the dance floor together. And now it's a small COVID bubble of a handful of employees. So yeah, we've, you know, once again, out of necessity, we've just tried to do everything in our power to keep the gang together. We have an amazing community of artists that, you know, we are their family, and the artists involved in our space are, they're not just coworkers. And I think it's so important for us to continue to be a home for these people, even if we can't physically host them. So for us, it's, and then as well as our audience. So we, you know, our community, like they participate in what we're doing. They're not just an audience that pays a price of admission and expects a product back. They are a part of our extended family. So for us, it's been about figuring out ways to stay connected with everyone. We've been doing that through our Patreon, doing everything from live streaming, different types of dance classes and like workouts, hosting our digital dance parties, which of course come nowhere near the joy that we all remember from being on the real dance floor. But it is amazing to see the inside of people's houses and them tricking it out and making it look like a nightclub. And, you know, listening to these amazing DJ sets, even as sometimes they're so good that you just start crying because you miss the good old days a year ago so much. And then we've just been trying to make use of the space as much as possible, as like renting it out for film and photo shoots. Yeah, just, you know, scrambling to squeeze any kind of money out of anywhere we can to just stay afloat.
Well, sounds like you guys have been extremely innovative and creative. It's a lot of different business models that you're kind of squeezing in there, but it sounds like it's working. So
yeah,
great.
and I think moving forward, as the weather is getting warmer, we've done quite a few pop-ups before. We do like a massive Halloween party every year. We've done pop-ups in other cities, and so because the House of Yes brand would be so difficult, if probably impossible to pull off with the reduced capacity, we're looking towards opportunities outdoors to keep doing House of Yes things, because I think a lot of our audience would be much more comfortable dancing together outdoors. And So that's an option, and I'm really excited for this new phase and for the summer.
That's very exciting. I'm sure a lot of people are going to be very excited about that. Melba, how about you? What changes have you had to make to your business recently to kind of flex and adjust to what's going on?
So every January, I come up with a new word for my team at Melba's. We had no clue that March 20th was going to happen the way that it did, as none of us had a clue about that. But it's interesting, the word that I came up with on January 2020 was pivot. It was the word pivot. Had no clue. Like the year before, I think it was proactive. The year before, I think it was proactive. So this year, January 2020, it was pivot. So what I did, I think we got the notice, Ariel, maybe was it March 15th, I think, or something like that. And I had a meeting with my team, my restaurant family, because as my grandmother used to say, Melby, she called me, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth so that you can listen twice as much as you speak. And it was important for me to hear what my team thought we should do. As Annie said, indoor dining shut down, literally. I think we heard that it may come on a Saturday or a Friday, and by Monday, boom, indoor dining was closed. We didn't close totally. When I sat down with my restaurant family, they said, well, let's just do takeout. So we went from 39 full-time employees down to, I think it was 9 or 11. That's what we did. They also suggested that we extend our hours. Previously, we were open from 5 to 11 daily. And on the weekends, we did brunch from 10 to 3. We decided to try and open from 12 to 12 and just do the same dinner menu for lunch. That was extremely successful because everyone was at home. People wanted to order, so that was very successful. We also upped our game on social media. We made sure that we posted at the same time every day. Sometimes it was twice a day. And we tagged a lot of different people. But being in the industry, as everyone on this panel knows, one of the things that gives us the most joy is serving people and taking care of other people. And just for our mental sanity, that was important for us to continue to do that. So we served over 100,000 meals within the last year to frontline workers, police officers, different hospitals, food pantries, et cetera. And that was important for us. We served food at the polls just to keep our spirits up, but also to keep our sense of community and to let people know that they were not alone. But pivot, that's what we did. When the Department of Transportation came and said that the dividers had to be this size, and then 2 weeks later, they changed the numbers on us. You guys remember that, right? We had to pivot again. And it's very difficult, as Annie said, because oftentimes we still had 100% of the bills, but 5 to 10% of the income coming in. And when you're worried, it's not so much about us. It's about the people, our restaurant and families. It's our restaurant family. How are they going to feed their families? How are they going to take care of their kids? That was the thing that really hurt me the most. And during this pandemic, I couldn't say to our restaurant family, our team, oh, this is going to be for 2 weeks, or this is going to be for 3 months. Who would think that a year later, we would still be in the midst of this? So it's been a very trying year, but it's also been a year of love and compassion. I often say that diamonds are born, so to speak, under heat and pressure. So there's been a lot of gems that have also come out of this pandemic as well.
I have to say, Melba, it's incredible that despite all these challenges that we're facing, you still somehow managed to stay incredibly positive and full of energy. How do you think we can continue to empower other women in the industry to be as positive and, also come out as leaders?
Well, one day I was doing an interview and I walked outside the restaurant, and it was a bleak day, which I'm sure for all of us, there's been some bleak days. especially over this last year. And I've been on Frederick Douglass Boulevard since 2004. I walked out this day and I looked to my right, and there was a statue, which has always been there, and I walk by it every day, of Frederick Douglass to my right. And then I look to my left, further up the road, there's Harriet Tubman, the statue of Harriet Tubman. And I look at these statues daily, and during the pandemic, I happened to look at them with a different eyesight, a different mindset. And I said, if Harriet Tubman can build an underground railroad, who am I to complain? As that gospel song says, I won't complain. Instead, what I do is I know that this too shall pass. I think as women, we always have hope. We always carry hope. But we don't just carry hope, we make hope happen. We see the light at the end of the tunnel, but we also pave the way. We don't sit back and wait for things to happen, we make things happen. And to young women out there watching this, our peers out there watching this, I know a lot of them know what we're talking about, but also having a sisterhood, a group of women that we can lean on, that we can talk to, that we can get advice from, I think is extremely important to our foundation and also to our future.
That's, I couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you. Just kind of touching on that, there's obviously an incredible amount of uncertainty for everyone in all industries, but I think especially this one right now. Ariel, at the forefront of what's happening in the city and, working with the mayor's office, do you have any words of advice or, any hope to add to what Melba was saying for, the women that are looking to enter the industry or re-enter the industry, now that we're kind of reopening?
Well, definitely hang in there. Don't let go. What do they say? We haven't come this far to come this far, right? Listen, this office and this position also had to pivot. This office, I wasn't the first woman director of the Office of Nightlife. I just want to say I was the first. I'd like to say wasn't the first woman. This position and this office pivoted in order to help an industry that was already struggling beforehand. It was created because this industry was already hard. This is a hard industry. Don't get it twisted. No matter how much you love it and the passion, it's tough. You got to love it that much to be able to do it, knowing how hard it is and doing it anyway. And it needs support. It needs respect. It needs help. And that's why this position was created, in order to help create that for this industry. None of us saw this coming, and we had to pivot, not just into helping the industry thrive, survive, grow, deal with the systemic problems that it was having with navigating bureaucracy. This now became crisis management mode. This became an emergency management office, and how to keep this industry and city from just falling off a cliff, right? And just grabbing every hand that we could to make sure that we all got back onto the boat and that we continue to row in the same direction and get through this together. And I will just say, as every woman on this call and every New Yorker knows, there's nothing New York can't do. There's nothing we can't do, especially if we're doing it together. Our love for this city, our love for each other, our love for humanity, for culture. And because failure is not an option, right? Where are we going? We're not going anywhere. But we also, there's so much reason for hope. We do see the light at the end of the tunnel. There is vaccines, but we also have to be real. We took a big hit. For so many people, the bleeding has not stopped. For so many people, the doors have not opened. There's still a lot of unanswered questions, a lot of uncertainty. We just have to stay real. We have to stay grounded. We have to stay connected. We have to stay optimistic. And if we know we will, then we will. And that's it. And we're just going to keep doing it. I think it's essential. The best thing that's happened, I think, is the way that we all unified, the way NAIVA came together, the Alliance came together, the hospitality coalitions, the women. We are now connected in a way because the distractions and the noise and the chaos of living in New York and running a restaurant or a bar stopped. And we all got to be in silence together and hear each other and connect. And I think that is how we're going to get through this, by taking that connection and not letting go, even once we reopen and we get back on our feet stronger and stronger. So that's what I hope this office can be for this industry, is that central point of contact for everyone. And let's just keep going and not let go and don't stop.
If that right there is the message to take away right there. If you don't feel inspired and motivated to get back out there, get your business back going, pivot. We don't have all the answers. Nobody does, but failure is not one of them, as we just said. Pivoting could be. But at this point, I think we're going to wrap this up. We could talk to these amazing women all day, but they have businesses to run. We hope you visit their venues, visit their businesses, reach out to them or myself online. We'd all love to, answer any questions you guys have, any support you need. Find other women in the industry. It will help you get through whatever you're going through. It will help empower you to keep going. It'll inspire you. And that's it. So, we'll see you guys out there. Thank you to the New York City Hospitality Alliance for hosting this event, for all of our amazing panelists, and for all of you for joining. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, guys.